Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Don Brennan with Continuity Insights, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Operational Resilience, Insights from Global Leaders During COVID-19, which will be presented by Tejas Katwala and Chad Robbins of Continuity Logic. As the title of today's webinar indicates, Tejas and Chad will share lessons learned from their conversations with global risk and resilience leaders. We'll touch on subjects ranging from the short and long-term impacts that the pandemic had on their existing resilience programs to what specific lessons for implementing operational resilience were uncovered to the ways in which business resilience will be redefined for the next wave of post-COVID-19. Before we get started, I want to remind you that we will have the opportunity to submit questions today by typing to the questions pane of your control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll collect these and then we'll address them at the end of today's broadcast. In addition, if you feel your question may require a more detailed explanation that can be adequately covered here, be sure to email Tejas or Chad with your question and they will respond to you directly. I just want to let you know that today's webinar will also be recorded for later on-demand viewing, and as a registered participant, you will receive a link to this recording. I'd now like to introduce today's speakers. Tejas Katwala, CEO and co-founder of Continuity Logic, has been a visionary leader, an innovative business process automation agent, and a trusted advisor to business executives for over 20 years. With his unique technology vision and relentless focus, he has designed an award-winning platform that operationalizes risk and resilience data to identify new ways to stabilize and protect an enterprise, enhance resiliency, adapt to disruption and change, and improve business performance. Previously, Tejas was the CEO and chief technologist for Recovery Planner, where he launched the company's software platform and was the first to introduce a cloud-based business continuity management solution. Chad Robbins is the SVP of Platform Strategy for Continuity Logic and has been an innovator within resiliency and mission-critical applications for close to a decade. His work with clients, developers, regulators, and the market has driven the platform into a widely adopted solution for continuity, risk, and resilience. His passion of pushing boundaries and focus on real-life data-driven use cases have developed dozens of organizations, improved their resiliency, posture, and maturity. Previously, Chad has held leadership roles within Continuity Logic, focusing on the global Fortune 2000 and using his healthcare experience from a clinical communications software company. Please welcome Tejas Katwala and Chad Robbins.
Great. Thank you so much, Don, for the fantastic introduction, and thank you, Continuity Insights, and thank you all, everyone in the audience that joined us today. I hope everyone is having a terrific morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. So again, we appreciate you all joining us and taking time out of your busy schedules to spend a few minutes with us today. We've got a pretty exciting topic to go through, and a number of different, I guess, lessons learned to review as well about operational resilience. And what we tried to do on our side is to go across a number of different industries and hear from executives in terms of what their experience was like as COVID-19 started to take shape, and as we continue today, even to battle through and stay operationally strong as possible. What we'll try to do through this session is, number one, take a look at a number of different industries and how they've been impacted by COVID-19 and what they're doing in response, what they've learned, and how they're trying to apply operational resilience. When we take a look at operational resilience, we'll try to define what that means, what it means for also for some of these industries, try to share some of the lessons learned so far, and where we think operational resilience can bring us when we look at the future. We'll also take a look at a quick product demonstration to give you an idea of what operational resilience will look like. So this way, when you try to build a program, you can get a quick snapshot of what a operational resilience structure actually looks like and how it behaves. We'll try to carve out some time at the end for questions and answers, so please feel free to send them across, and we will try to tackle all of them the best we possibly can. Okay, so let's move forward. As Don mentioned, my background is in process automation. I don't have the field experience that many of you do that are on this call from the business continuity perspective, DR or crisis management or risk management, compliance. What I try to do from my side is understand the process that's needed to deploy programs that can manage all of these processes and have them talk and work together and bring automation to the front end of that relationship of processes. And then we try to do that with automation with our software and help our customers typically deploy our solution across the enterprise so that they can effectively manage resilience, risk, and compliance in a automated, governed fashion. So let's hop in. As I announced just a second ago, what we're going to do is take a look at some experiences from executives and across the various industries. We want to take a look at short and long-term impacts on your existing resilience program and how they've been able to take their institutional readiness and try to gain more support internally to improve resilience, and how they think they're going to, how they really see what's going to happen with resilience moving forward and how it's being redefined, and how perhaps operational resilience will set the stage for post-COVID-19 or the next disruption, and how all those lessons are helping us improve resilience overall. The industries that we're going to look at span financial services, manufacturing, healthcare, pharma, government, and retail and digital. A lot of different areas to look at. Because we have limited time, I think what I'll do is take a couple of deeper dives into financial services, manufacturing, and healthcare. And as we go through the presentation, we'll bring in the various topics we're talking about so that we can touch on all of the others. So we can try to be as holistic as possible when it comes to operational resilience and COVID-19 and how it's impacting all these different areas. What I will say is government is probably the one area that looks at operational resiliency a little bit different than all the others, because all the others are consumer facing, and in the private sector, while government is trying to make sure that it can continue delivering its service to the people regardless of any and every condition that exists. So different set of challenges, but at the end of the day, when we're talking about the pandemic and operational resilience, it's all about that end state customer, whether that customer is a citizen or a consumer. We want to be able to take those services and be able to map that back in terms of how we deliver that service. So we will jump in. Let's hop in first into financial services. What I thought I would do with this presentation, I think many of us have seen the data, the reports, the information about COVID-19 and how it's impacted business continuity and disaster recovery and other areas of governance in amazing detail. And there's more and more information that's coming out seemingly by the day that's giving us a holistic picture of what's happening within organizations and how we're handling resilience. So I wanted to, number one, understand from the executives that we spoke about, not only their challenges, but what about some of the things that have gone right? So we can also understand what did work, because it's not all about how business continuity was challenged with the pandemic. It certainly has many challenges and a lot of things that we need to improve on, but some things actually did work well. When we take a look at financial services, it is classically the most regulated industry on the planet. Because of that, it's also one of the most mature industries on the planet when it comes to resiliency. There's a lot of work that's gone into a financial institution's resilience program, and that work has gone on continuously for many, many years now. So there is that sense of maturity there. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to start with financial services, because when we look at financial services, number one, they had plans, procedures, tested plans and procedures in place to handle things like work from home. Perhaps not to the extent that we've had to deal with, but financial firms were a bit more ready for work from home than other industries. And those processes have been tested again and again. And there's other reasons for that too, not just because they had the maturity on the compliance side to do that, but it goes hand in hand with the second thing that went really well for them, which is having positive customer experiences. A lot of the reasons why financial firms were maybe a little bit more ready for the pandemic situations and challenges versus other industries, because they were already going through a massive digital transformation within their respective organizations before the pandemic hit, for a number of years prior to the pandemic taking shape. So financial institutions have been getting ready to operate from the cloud, operate from wherever, and be able to service their customers wherever they are. It wasn't about the brick and mortar services only. It had a lot to do with online experiences. So they were more ready and demonstrated remarkable resilience as the pandemic started to unfold. But that said, there are a number of challenges for financial firms. Number one, complexity. There's so much complexity that's growing within the financial services landscape, and it continues to grow. That complexity comes from digital transformation, and because all of our services are operating from the cloud and within financial services, and we're working from home, you're talking about a lot of different networks and different layers of security and protocols that need to be in place to secure that entire ecosystem between the employees that work at the firm, the customers, and the back end systems that are residing in the cloud. Since we're going through digital transformation and continuing to go through that, there are a lot of changes, and those changes are making it very difficult for the mappings, the dependency mappings between people, process, technology to stay aligned as transformation is happening. The velocity of change has made it very challenging for business continuity programs to stay in step with those transformations. We've seen that time and again. So that's been a massive challenge. And when we talk about trying to map all of the people, process, and technologies and third parties that connect up to a service, that work has been a massive undertaking. Like most industries, the supply chain, third-party services, fourth parties, that's come under the microscope, and the need to get closer to our critical third-party providers became abundantly clear. And you're going to see that theme, that particular theme, play out in every industry. And as we look at financial institutions and the services they deliver, they're also dealing with more regulatory pressure. They're being forced to look at a service-driven approach to resilience, operational resilience. That's what we'll be talking about throughout this presentation. So they're, again, a little bit ahead of the curve when we talk about operational resilience and why they're doing that. But overall, the financial institutions have been doing a little bit better when it comes to responding to COVID-19, but they also have their challenges. Looking at manufacturing, probably one of the more complicated pandemic industries to really look into, because manufacturing is broad. The products and services that are delivered by manufacturing are very robust, very broad, and today most manufacturers are putting things together based on supplies that they're getting globally. The employees that work for a manufacturer typically work where things are manufactured or within their corporate offices. The aspects of manufacturing that made COVID-19 extremely challenging for these organizations, remote workforce, remote workforce, first and foremost, very difficult because, again, a lot of what a manufacturer does requires people at production sites to make sure that things are going well. Building redundancy into their supply chain and hand in hand with creating transparency in the supply chain became crucial. A lot of the suppliers that they had really, really strong need for weren't there. They were dealing with their own set of issues throughout the pandemic. And that visibility into the supply chain went about as far as having checks in the box in terms of, do you have this and do you have that, when it came time for reality to see if supplies could actually be delivered. It actually didn't happen. So manufacturers went through a number of really difficult lessons going through the pandemic. And now they're coming through that, and they're realizing that they need to deploy data analytics more so that they can have a closer look at their supply chain, and they can have a closer look at their manufacturing lines. And if they bring in more automation, then the remote workforce can actually take a look at production lines remotely more effectively. And I know that there are some manufacturing organizations that did really well. We spoke to Dyson, who did an exceptional job throughout the pandemic. And what they did is they rapidly were able to adjust to what was going on with the pandemic. Dyson, as many of you know, they are producers of consumer goods. They were able to tack during the pandemic, and they're still doing this now. And they were able to use their technology, their air compression technology, to build ventilators. It was fantastic. They did a great job of doing that. Very noble and very much necessary. And what they did is they repurposed their logic, and they had 5 core principles in helping them do that. Grasping the innovation problem, being able to map all the resources to figure out how they're going to do it, leveraging emerging technologies so that they can do some pretty cool things like taking a look at data analytics. They encourage collaboration up and down their organization, which again is very difficult when you've got everyone working remotely. And they're able to integrate end users. What does that mean? They are able to really bring in that consumer into the picture when they were talking about their innovation and going through this and understanding what they needed to do. So yes, many challenges, but organizations like Dyson really came through and did a fantastic job. Healthcare, so many challenges for healthcare from so many different perspectives. From a business continuity perspective, and I'll try to keep it to the business continuity perspective. Here again, we had the good and the challenging. On the good side, healthcare organizations received throughout the pandemic amazing credibility and visibility for business continuity. Healthcare, especially hospitals, has historically had a tough time with being able to build up business continuity programs because it just falls so far down the line when we talk about compliance and risk management. To be able to have automation at that level has been challenging. But getting through the pandemic, hospitals have gained visibility, and they've been able to demonstrate their resiliency, especially on the DR side and on the process side, really. But some of the things that they've stumbled into as they moved on with their pandemic execution plan, number one, too many silos of information from the technology side, from the business process side, from the operations side, from the supplier side. That happens in a lot of the industries, if not all of the industries, but hospitals were burdened with the silos of information that they're dealing with. A lot of healthcare organizations were putting together real-time impact discovery sessions. What does that mean? Well, we do our business impact assessments, we do our risk assessments, and typically they're done at various times of the year. But when we're talking about the pandemic, things are changing on a daily basis so quickly with such velocity that they had to figure out impact on sometimes an hour-by-hour basis because they have to figure out patient services. At the end of the day, whatever happens, they've got to make sure they can deliver healthcare services to the patients that are in the beds, right? So impact hourly, daily, weekly, and some of those impacts are related to supplies, such as PPP and having that in place. Application dependencies on technology needed to be reprioritized constantly. Why? Well, when hospitals and healthcare organizations looked at work from home, their work from home plans focused more on the corporate side of healthcare, people that are working the back office or the front office. And for them, they were able to work from home. Those things were tested. But throughout the pandemic, there was a huge uptick in telehealth demand, which soared from perhaps a couple of hundred to thousands per day. And that overwhelmed networks. The VPN requirements grew from thousands to many, many thousands, in some cases tens of thousands. And this happened because you have everyone at home, just like every other organization, but in many cases also the physicians and frontline healthcare workers were also dialing in remotely to work with their patients when they can do something like that. But that burden came at a cost of really challenging business continuity programs, and a ton of lessons that have been learned there. But I think the visibility of those lessons are going to catapult resiliency within healthcare. And I think it's going to be very exciting to see how they're able to take the lessons learned in financial institutions and instead of other industries that have historically had more mature programs. So the need for testing scenarios, you're going to see that probably first and foremost inside of healthcare. All of the CIOs and technology leaders that we spoke to know that as they get back to normal, they're going to have to focus on their ability to test and bring more maturity to those processes so that they can handle things like telehealth when it spikes up the way it did. Okay, so across these industries, there's been a heavy reliance on supply chain, and reacting quickly to disruption really requires for us to have a flexible ecosystem of suppliers and partners that can handle sudden shortfalls or even produce new products like Dyson did. That means we need to be able to set up alternate manufacturing sites. We need to have alternate suppliers, backup suppliers. We need to be able to optimize that cost. We need to improve the visibility across the entire network and accelerate the reaction times that we need to have in place so that we can make the decisions that we need to make. So all of that requires a lot of digital collaboration. It requires a lot more of working closer with our suppliers. Critical suppliers should effectively be part of resiliency strategies and programs. Code testing, very important. But what I really want to communicate here is we know all of that. We know that if we can code test with suppliers, that's going to make us more resilient. It'll give us more visibility and things like that. But there's another look at suppliers, and that's the competitive advantage that it actually gives us. So looking at some of the manufacturers, looking at financial institutions that had backup suppliers, they were actually able to accelerate growth and revenue because they had processes and procedures and suppliers in place. They took advantage of an available market. And when you look at it from that perspective, you're able to shift the cost of resiliency from the cost side over to the revenue side. And anytime you can do that and you can monetize what's traditionally an expense category, I think you're going to deliver something very special to your organization. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned here in those organizations that were able to do that and demonstrate that. I think more organizations need to think about the investment in resiliency from that perspective because they were able to take advantage of a marketplace. Dyson, again, is a fantastic example of that. So looking at the road ahead, navigating the road ahead for resilience, what are some of the key findings that we saw across the conversations across industry? Well, first and foremost, disparate systems. There's no single source of truth for data. There are, when you take a look at business continuity, DR, crisis management, different data sources, but even more challenging, different language between business continuity, DR, and crisis management. We have to be able to change that. That more than anything else makes the data even less usable, even if it is current, because we need to all speak the same language when it comes to resilience. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but what I will talk about is access and validity of employee contact information. This should not be the case in today's day and age. We have so many different opportunities to have information available and get updated information. We should always understand that so we know what's happening with our staff, with our employees, with everyone that keeps organizations running. Some of the recommendations that have come out, especially those organizations that have adopted operational resilience. Number one, look at operational resilience. And when you look at resilience, you really need to be able to understand that it requires, resilience itself requires visibility, it requires adaptability and accountability. We start with those pillars, and enterprise risk, resilience, technology innovation, all of that should use the techniques and tools of operational resilience. And something that I'll talk about for a moment, which is process mining. What is process mining? It's the ability to map all of your business processes to the people, technology, suppliers, everything. So this way you can get meaningful data. Now, a lot of business continuity programs today do that, but the next step to that is to be able to connect the people, process, technology to operations and performance. So this way we can take a look at how we may be able to leverage the investment we're making in resilience to help optimize business operations, and also to visualize risk and resiliency data in a way that leadership can use to help make decisions. And I know that conversation goes back and forth in terms of support from leadership and what they will actually gain out of a business continuity program. But take a look at this. I found this to be extremely interesting. CFOs see the connection between analytics and visualization. They use this every day. So the office of the CFO is using data to explore customer information, to develop algorithms and models to optimize their organization, to take a look at risk information and optimize that, analyze large quantities of transactional data, and so on and so forth. The C-suite is ready to look at this data and utilize data. We have to be able to bring risk and resiliency information in a form and format where data is consumable by the C-suite. And you may wonder, well, we've tried to do that with our business continuity data and the plans and things like that. But if you look carefully at the programs that we built around business continuity, there's one major flaw in our programs. And I think that's where we've seen through the last year where business continuity has received a black eye. I don't think it should have. As a process person, I think you have to look at what the intent of business continuity was and is. And that intent has everything to do with the C word. What is that C word? It's compliance. More than 90% of business continuity programs received their budget, their marching orders, so this way they would be compliant and organizations can conduct business. When you are building programs for compliance purposes, you may not be looking at things operationally. So what do I mean by that? Let's take a look at the definition of compliance. At the end of this definition, you'll see that compliance is all about being able to play within the rules, understanding the rules. So this way you can conduct business within the industry you're in. And it's all about regulations and government legislation. We want ultimately the check in the box to conduct business. When we look at resilience, it's very different. Resilience is the ability to recover quickly from difficulties, from toughness, from issues, from disruptions. And when we go through and have been going through the pandemic, resilience has also been about each one of us individually and our ability to deal with significant stress, trauma, threats, tragedy, all of that we've seen throughout 2020. And hopefully 2021 is turning the page on that. But the role of resilience is about the ability to continue an operation, continue an activity. Compliance is, again, about that check in the box. So when we take a look at our business continuity programs and we hold up our program against a mirror, what are you going to see? Are you going to see a program that's more about compliance, or are you going to see a program that's about operational resilience? It's a really great question, and it's a question that goes way beyond just the business continuity teams that are on the phone calls today. It's also about leadership and what they are chartering this program for and why. It's also up to us, as well the practitioners on the call, to educate our organizations so that they can understand the difference between compliance and resilience and what we need to do. And here's a way that I like to look at things. When you look at the world from a compliance perspective or an operational resilience perspective, we all love to use red, yellow, green. Whether that red, yellow, green comes from a quantitative or qualitative place doesn't really matter for now, anyways, for this conversation. But on the compliance side, on the left side, the red, yellow, and green, when it comes down to a service, it helps you define whether that service, or identify whether that service is compliant or not. A green is a yes, a yellow is it's in progress, and a red, not compliant. When you give that data to leadership, great. So we know what's compliant and not compliant. When it comes time for a disruption, that's not really going to help us. When we take a look at operational resilience, the red, yellow, green, the green says we have good service. So if we are traveling, if we're in London and we're going through the tube, and every few minutes we know if the service is good or not, the green lets us know as consumers, as passengers, it lets us know that the service is good. We all understand what that means. We don't need to figure things out. Yellow is a delayed service, or red is the service is not available. All right, I'm going to go and go find alternate transportation. Very simple and very informative. But that, in a nutshell, is the difference between compliance and operational resilience. Another way to look at this is when we all traveled. I can't wait until I can get back on a plane and travel again. But when I went to the airport, operational resilience, when I go into the airport and I look at the schedule, I want to know if my flight is on time, or if the plane that I'm waiting for has landed, or it's delayed or it's canceled. That's what I care about. When leaders look at operational data, they want to see information that's going to help them make decisions, just like I'm looking at this to see how it's going to help me make decisions. So let's go over to the business continuity side, and you'll see two columns here. The first thing we start with our reporting is RTO, and then we have statuses about RTOs. So our schedule is going to look a lot like an RTO board, and what plans have been tested and things like that. Maintenance schedule. When I go into an airport, I don't want to see the maintenance schedule. It doesn't do anything for me. It's great for the compliance people that are in charge of compliance within the airport, but not for the passenger, not for the customer, not for the consumer. Operational resilience is all about you as the consumer. So you understand what's happening and you understand what's available to you and not available to you. And we need that information right away, instantly. It has to be available. Another really good example I like to use with leadership when I meet with them is going back to financial institutions. When I look at my Bank of America app on my mobile device, I want to know how much money I've got in my account. Right then and there, that very second, I want to know how much I have. I don't want to know how much I had a month ago, last quarter, last year. Business continuity and risk management data elements that we have come to use and report against reflect information that existed a quarter ago. Business continuity updates from a quarter ago, risk assessments from a year ago. It doesn't do you any good when you talk about operational resilience. That stuff is all useless. We have to, and I'm not saying dump compliance, we need that, otherwise we can't conduct business. We have to be able to take that next step and operationalize our programs, as well as not lose and take the focus off compliance. It's difficult, there's a lot to do, but it doesn't mean that we have to go ahead and reinvent the wheel. We need to improve it. So how do we do that? So the way to do that is to start taking a look at the classic business continuity program versus operational resilience. Your classic program, people, process, technology, you've got information about that. We need to extend that and introduce a concept called business services, things that you're delivering to the customer, functions and services that a customer uses, like payment screening or mortgage services or whatever that might be, and then build the people, process, technology behind it. You've got that information, at least on the back end of, and what you're going to do now is take your business services, people, process, and applications and connect it operationally to how those services are delivered. And you want to be able to measure how we do, and how we measure that is using the impact tolerance, a new data element, a data element that is sometimes complicated to understand and sometimes gets confused with, is this yet another RTO measurement? It is not. Impact tolerance is information that measures the service, how the service is performing. So if you're making bread, how many loaves of bread per hour? If you're underperforming on that, what's the tolerance level that we can live with before there is a business issue? So a lot of different elements of data to consider, but most important concept, you're now looking at real-time information that's going to affect your ability to continue as an operation or understand how you're continuing as an operation. You're not just looking at an RTO that was created through the planning process. That'll become helpful for you for sure, but you need the real-time information from an impact tolerance that's going to help you understand how to make the decisions you need to make, how to prioritize recovery, because not everything can be planned beforehand and be found in one of the pages of a 1,000-page book for business continuity. We need to have raw data plus your risk information plus your business continuity information and bring that together. And when we can do that, we have the ability to achieve operational resilience. There's a lot more to that, of course. Some of the lessons learned on the implementation side. Number one, you want to be able to get to that top of the iceberg and get that important service catalog going. A lot of organizations think, well, if I've got a list of services that I deliver to my customer, boom, I'm there. You're not. There's a lot more there behind that top of the iceberg. You have to get underneath. You got to get to the challenge areas. Those challenge areas are understanding those impact tolerances for the services that you are delivering to your customer. For example, again, I'll go back to the bank. If I am going to my Bank of America app and I'm looking for my bank balance, I can't see it. I go back 30 minutes later, I can't see it. I go back at the end of the day, I can't see it. I go back tomorrow, I can't see it. There's a good chance that's going to affect my decision to either stay with that bank or go someplace else. You also want to be able to have a strategic BIA. That's what the S stands for there. It's an SBIA against that service. It's going to look at information perhaps at a little bit higher level, but you want to be able to take that information and then push it down the delivery chain for that service to the people, process, technology. You want to be able to come up with better ways of testing, because it's not going to be about the tabletop testing. You're talking about a lot of different things that are coming together all at once. So we've got to get clever with how we test and come up with new ways of doing that. Utilize AI, utilize robotic automation to be able to create processes that help us test. And as we do that, understand what our mappings look like. You need to have mappings in place because these digital processes are so complex. Regardless of the organization you're in, it's very difficult to find a single individual that understands that entire delivery chain of what a particular service entails when it gets to or in the hands of the customer. Go back to checking my bank balance. When I check my bank balance, I get that information instantly, but there could be 100, if not 1,000 different things that light up within the bank's network for me to get that information. What are all those things? That makes up the map. And that map has to always be up to date. And that's complicated. That requires a lot of planning and a lot of work, but that's what goes into operational resilience, making sure you've got that data always up to speed. At the end of the day, what do we have? We've got a new framework for operational resilience, for business resilience. That new framework is built on continuous improvement. Just remember, when you check your bank balance, you want to know what it is right now, not what it was a year ago. Continuous improvement is not the BIA that you do once a quarter, once a year. It's the BIA that continuously updates itself when the organization experiences change. That's the true nature of continuous improvement. Even if you move that BIA or that risk assessment down to once a quarter, doesn't matter. That's not enough. We have to be able to create processes through automation to be able to deliver that real-time information, the information that was necessary when the pandemic started, that information that's necessary to make the decisions we need to make. So what I'd like to do at this time is to now hand it over to Chad Robbins so he can visualize what all this kind of means and how it looks like from an automation perspective. Chad, you want to take it away?
Yeah, happy to, Tejas. So if you can see my screen, I'm going to take a quick little flyby on what operational resilience means automated. So here I'm logged into CL360. This is just consider it one of our out-of-box templates for this. As Tejas mentioned, and the first thing to think about one of our clients gave us is, how do I know if something is a business service or not? Like, how should I put an impact tolerance against it? Here was our thoughts. If someone outside of your organization can notice when a process or a service goes down, that is what you want to start tracking. So think of it front to back processes. So here I have a list of just 6 business services. I've got a criticality associated to them. And then I have a health check. And this is really key to this entire thought process, is that throughout the life cycle of a business service, there's going to be a lot of ins and outs, changes in vendors, applications, dependencies. You want to have a quick way to start grading yourself. And this is almost an honesty subjective check. So we look at our availability, we look at our security, and then through that other lens, how long can we be disrupted? What is that maximum level? What this data starts to culminate to is revenue impacts. So I can see here, based on those 6 services, I can look very quickly and bring in some monitoring data directly about that service. So here, if we're looking at a debit card, so I want to go in and swipe, if this is impacted, I'm looking at a pretty hefty financial impact. I also want to test through plausible yet severe scenarios. And then I want to understand criticality. But what we've learned here during COVID with our clients is you need a visual representation of what we're going to call a tube map or a dependency mapping. So here, based on those 6 services, I want to start looking at the different layers and start visualizing that data. Who are the suppliers that play a key role? How are they mapped? And then we'll go into an exact use case of this, as Tejas mentioned, the ability to check your online balance. So first off, we think through, how does a user go into the system? What do they do? How do I define this? Here I can see what a business service is, understand that description, and we can also tie into some of that traditional business continuity data. When you see this criticality, this is the first step. It's gathering all of your business services. Think of it as just one long list, and then giving them a criticality. Based on that criticality, I can start associating different metrics based on either thresholds. And again, this does not have to be a banking example. This could be retail, which almost touches the customer at all times with all services, but I want those metrics. Then I could start incorporating and overlaying that levels of disruption. And then here's where you get the bang for your buck. When we think about that financial impact, and then again, we can connect to different sources of truth, data feeds to bring this in. What's our revenue impact? And then with that operational resilience lens, not only are you thinking about the financial, but you're thinking how many of our clients are going to be impacted and at over what time? And how long can we take a disruption of this type? We tie it to people. So if Chad is going to come in once a year, meet with a team, a lot of our clients do this in workshop type settings, meet with a reviewer, and then pass it off to a final approver to set that criticality. Let's go through that. Here, this creates a resilience category, or really your first step at a BIA. Once I understand my criticality, I've got my business service. Now I start bringing in mapping. So mapping can be a variety of different assets. For this example here, we're adding locations that are going to support this service. I can drill into the data as I need to and go directly to that data source of truth. I can start tying into my processes. And you'll see here, we've got a few examples, and this is creating a gap analysis. This can bring in that business continuity traditional data. This could also be a top-down approach where you start at the business service and then actually select the processes, the applications, the suppliers that support you. The net result is that when you've got these 3 steps in place, then you can start doing scenario testing. So what if we lost a key technology? What if we lost a key vendor? What do we do if we actually lost a building and this is supporting our process for our users to come in and, like Tejas mentioned, hit their mobile app, do something, check their online balance? What we learned during COVID specifically, where there were 4 peaks all at once, and they hit right around March of 2020. First one was a user came in and they wanted to check their balance for a paycheck. Did I get paid? Secondly, during COVID, right around the March, April here in the States, my tax return. Third, I was hoping for one of the first government stimulus checks. And finally, if you unfortunately lost your career, your job, then you were looking for an unemployment check. So what this did is this spiked access directly to this business service. So what we work with our clients on is almost coming up with a resilience rating. How did we do during this exercise? Where are we lacking? And then you can start incorporating additional metrics here. But again, you have to have the first few of these in place before you start giving yourself a grade. What you find is that during this process, you're going to find gaps. You're going to find gaps with your suppliers. Specifically, IT seems to be another challenge because you have to map system, to infrastructure, to data center, and then you can get into the networking side. But what we do here is create a digital project manager where you can start thinking through, well, okay, we've got a huge gap. Paul needs to come in and try to close this gap. The final result is considering this. What is the customer journey for the business service? To check your online balance, you're probably going to hit your mobile app, but you could log in via a web browser. You could walk in and use a kiosk at a branch. So if we take that concept and we start with the online balance, I need a visual representation of the mapping of this. I want to understand my key processes, my suppliers, and also my applications. And this could go 10, 20, 30 levels deep. For our use case, we like to focus on the end user. What would a service manager do with this kind of data? If there's something 10 levels down on some application or vendor that could impact the overall experience for 1.75 million of your users, obviously they become a key piece of the puzzle. But the result is what we try to do is work through, we understand there's gaps, we understand we have criticalities of our services, we've ranked them to the best of our ability. How do we define some impact tolerances? Let's test those, gives ourselves a little bit of a scoring, pass along issues, and then we visualize the customer journey. When our CFOs and our COOs of our clients start seeing this, they say, aha, okay, you've now mapped this for me. I understand impacts over time, and I can start visually representing that. But Don, Tejas, back to you.
Great. So how about we switch over to questions and answers?
Okay. Thank you, Tejas. Thank you, Chad. Really insightful presentation. Really enjoyed that one today. Yeah, right now we have a little bit of time, so let's jump into as many questions as we can get to. So our first question is directed to you, Tejas, and the question is, operational resilience seems a bit different than traditional business continuity. Are there steps that you can suggest that we take now to grow into that mindset?
Sure. I think there are a few things to do. Number one, I think the Office of Business Continuity or Resilience or Risk Management, I think they need to start taking the next steps to creating partnerships on the operational side of the house, also with HR to understand the services that are delivered to customers so that we can create a service catalog for that and understand the people intelligence and to how those things are delivered and start to build that information base. Once you do that, you can then go to the operational leaders and start to figure out what kind of tolerances are in place for each of those services and start to then architect how that information is going to connect to your classic business continuity model.
Okay, thank you, Tejas. Chad, it looks like this question is directed to you, and we already have a big cultural gap between the DC and DR teams. How can I explain the value of this to them?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but I'll give my best response for it. So because operational resilience comes from the top down, and it's really starting with those key business services on your clients, your customers, that is the story. The story is that we as a company need to provide this service to make sure we have revenues for our shareholders, for our employees, and that we can keep our doors open. If that's the starting point, you can talk your way down from that. So if you're a retail operation and you need customers to come into your stores and buy things, if they can't buy things, it doesn't matter whose issue that is. It's a company-wide issue. So showing some gaps between the business, which needs that ability to provide for the customer, and IT that needs to support it, it's just having a great conversation on how critical is this? What if we really did lose this for a while? And Tejas' example of the airline ticketing and looking at that window, when people can't get on airlines and they're waiting at the airport, it's an immediate impact. And your average flyer does not really care if it's an IT issue, a business issue. It just needs to be resolved.
Okay. Thank you, Chad. Next question. Tejas, why don't you field this one? It's dealing with operational resilience again. Can we get started with operational resilience if we don't have impact tolerances aligned yet?
Yeah, that's probably the number one question I get asked about as soon as organizations try to launch into OpRes. The answer is yes. You can start with operational resilience without understanding your impact tolerances yet. I wouldn't expect anyone to be able to right out of the gate do that. So I would think it's a misnomer to think that we can't tackle operational resilience without impact tolerances. I think your first step is to understand what services you're delivering for your customers and where they're coming from, and start to work with the information you already have. It's never advisable to try to boil the ocean all at once. So start with that catalog. Start connecting that catalog to the people, process, technology, and supplier database that you already have inside of your business continuity program. So you can start to at least visualize for your leadership what that delivery chain looks like at the end of the day from a customer perspective. Once you do that, I think you'll start to naturally, organically have conversations about impact tolerances. Impact tolerances are very different than just about any data element that's captured within a business continuity program classically, because it's looking at real-time performance information. It's that big step, that big leap forward for a business continuity program to make that takes it from a compliance exercise to now an operational necessity. So take your time with it. First, build up your services catalog, and then work with your service managers to understand the tolerances, because each service most likely will have its own set of tolerances and data and types of data to measure that service. That's going to be the big challenge. But I can guarantee that you're not going to have to take that challenge on yourself as a business continuity practitioner or as a risk manager or as a head of resilience. You will at that point partner with other parts of the organization on the operational side. Once you operationalize, your program is going to look very different. It's going to be very consumable by all parts of the enterprise at that point, especially leadership, so you can get that very important, meaningful data in real time across to them.
Okay, thank you, Tejas. Let's see, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more question. I believe this would be directed to you, Chad. How far can your dependency mappings go? This seems like a heavy lift and may overburden a service owner with information overload.
Yeah, I think that that's a loaded question for us. Technically, we have no limitation. You could have an unlimited number of dependencies. You just have to remember that you're going to start scanning across, a large screen. What we think through with our clients is what's the best impact for a user. You might not want to show them 50 relationships going from left to right, but they want to think through what are the big ticket items that we could focus on now. Let's grow into this. IT, on the other hand, has a different view. They're viewing the back-end technology because they're starting to map all of the applications, your servers, your networks. And then if you go one level deeper, once, maybe twice per year, if they have to do a big upgrade of a system, they want to know, hey, if this system goes down, what are all the services that might get impacted? We can't take that chance if it's the holiday season and people want to go shopping. They need to have this service. So maybe we plan this for, let's say, March instead. So technically, we don't have a limitation, but we work on ways within our system to present the user, whether they be business user, IT user, CFO, quick snapshot of data, make some real-time decisions, and then come back and continuously improve with that.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Appreciate that. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I want to thank our panel, and I want to thank our audience for submitting some great questions, food for thought for everyone. And I want to let you know that if you have questions we didn't get to today, or if you think of new questions, you can reach out directly to Tejas and Chad. As you can see, their email contact information is on the screen. And also just want to let you know that we will be posting a recording of this webinar on the Continuity Insights website in a few days if you happen to miss any part of today's broadcast. So as we wrap up, thank you once again, Tejas and Chad, and thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar, Operational Resilience, Insights from Global Leaders During COVID-19. On behalf of Continuity Insights and our corporate sponsor, Continuity Logic, thank you for joining us. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.